For 2,000 years, every large organization on Earth has run on the same exact operating system. That is human middle management. But AI is about to disrupt and kill that. We're going to be looking at Jack Dorsey's article on X called From Hierarchy to Intelligence. It opens up here with a claim that the Roman army has had to solve a very difficult problem since 2,000 years ago. How do you coordinate thousands of people across vast distances with limited communication? Their answer was a nested hierarchy with a consistent span of control at every level. The smallest unit was the contubernium, 8 soldiers who shared a tent, equipment, and a mule, led by a decanus. 10 contubernia, formed by a century of 8 men. Okay, I'm not even going to get into these Roman terms, but you get the point. It's a gradually growing hierarchy. I'm going to pull up the visual aid to help us picture this. It all starts with the smallest unit. In this case, in a software world, it's probably an IC, an individual contributor. Then these individual contributors, the contubernium said is an 8. So you'd say, plus 6 more. These are all managed by a single manager. Someone probably in the M track. Those managers all have their own individual contributors. And when you add all of them up, you then need someone else to step in between these managers, or rather above these managers, and manage them. This creates a hierarchy. You have individual contributors, you have managers of managers, and managers of managers. That's what's called the middle management layers. In an organizational structure, upper level management communicate decisions down to their direct reports, which then communicate to theirs, and so on. So back to Jack Dorsey's article, he's drawing some historical parallels from the Roman army. Then he goes on to talk about Prussia and Napoleon's army and so on. So if Jack's company Block are moving away from having these organizational structures, where are they going? What's different? At Block, we're questioning the underlying assumption that organizations have to be hierarchically organized, with humans as the coordination mechanism. Instead, we intend to replace what the hierarchy does. Most companies using AI today are given everyone a copilot, which makes the existing structure work slightly better without changing it. We're after something different, a company built as an intelligence, or mini AGI. Seems to me that instead of them classing an organization, a company, as something that is a lot of people organizing themselves in various type of layers, they are applying some almost neural network-like behaviors to the definition of a company. I feel like we're going to see some parallels here in how they decided to restructure their company to how agentic AI works. And the first piece of evidence can be seen here. For this to work, a company needs 2 things, a kind of a world model of its own operations and a customer signal rich enough to make that model useful. To me, it just sounds like they need to gather a lot of data and plug that all into an LLM or an agent that is able to make sense of that data. This is where it gets interesting. People lie on surveys. They ignore ads. They abandon cards. But when they spend, save, send, borrow, or repay, that's the truth. Every transaction is a fact about someone's life. Block sees both sides of millions of these transactions every day. The buyer through Cash App and the seller through Square, plus the operational data from running the merchant's business. Looks like this is exactly what I predicted. That gives the customer world model something rare. A per customer, per merchant understanding of financial reality built from honest signal that compounds. The richer the signal, the better the model. The better the model, the more transactions. The more transactions, the richer the signal. Fair enough. And it goes ad infinitum. In fact, I have personally discovered recently that when I'm working with Claude Code or any other agentic engineering assistant, I tend to want to document the state of the application. I create a docs folder at the root of the repository, and then I document all sorts of various interactions. It could be how the authentication flow works. It could be how the backend is supposed to send email notifications. It could be how the iOS app performs background data loading from disk. These markdown files are brilliant because I can quickly either glance at them or give them to an agent, which can quickly understand how the system is built. These small, compact markdowns describe everything you'd need to know when you want to dive into a specific system in the repo you're working in. The problems stem from when your codebase actually gets desynced from these docs. You implement some changes, you forget to either add a hook or something that tells the LLM to go and document the changes that you have just made. that way keeping documentation always synced with the state of code itself. However, to answer the question of how it works, the only thing that will never be wrong is code itself, is the implementation. This is where we get more into almost dynamic programming concepts, where you choose how much you want to store versus how much you want to compute at runtime. So, for example, instead of having this deterministic markdown file that explains how your one-time password emailing flow works, you could run an Explore agent that goes, aggregates all of the code files that it deems relevant, and it presents you with an answer of exactly how your one-time password emailing flow works. The issue here comes from potentially non-deterministic model hallucinations, but those can be solved with providing it relevant files, having enough context, and using a model big enough. Why do I mention this? I feel like they are trying to recreate something very similar here. Instead of having people and hierarchies and documentations and everything, they're just wanting to run everything off of this quote-unquote live world model that knows exactly everything about the state of their company, or rather their platform. So instead of having product managers, or I suppose middle managers that would write documents explaining exactly how many leads they've gotten this month, how many people have done refunds, etc. My assumption is they run this model knows everything about every transaction that's been made. Therefore, at runtime, it can just infer these type of things directly from the data itself. And so we can see here, the company world model is how the company understands itself and its own operations, performance, and priorities, replacing the information that used to flow through layers of management. Okay, so it seems like they were talking about these kind of two sides of this. You have the actual customer model, the data model, and you also have another model, which is the company world model, which is a model that kind of understands the company and how it's supposed to work. Looks like then they need an intelligence layer. This is what composes capabilities into solutions for specific customers at specific moments and delivers them proactively. A restaurant's cash flow is tightening ahead of a seasonal dip the model has seen before. The intelligence layer composes a short-term loan from the lending capability, adjusts the repayment schedule using the payments capability, and surfaces it to the merchant before they even think to look for financing. Wow. A Cash App's user spending pattern shifts in a way the model associates with a move to a new city. The intelligence layer composes a new direct deposit setup, a Cash App card with boosted categories for their new neighborhood, and a savings goal calibrated to their updated income. No product manager decided to build either solution. The capabilities existed. The intelligence layer recognized the moment and composed them. Interesting. So a lot of what I said, the kind of quote-unquote dynamic programming coming into play here. And I think lastly, here they say interfaces, hardware and software, Square, Cash App, Afterpay, Tidal, Bitkey, Proto. These are delivery surfaces through which the intelligence layer delivers composed solutions. They are important, but they are not where the value is created. The value is in the model and the intelligence. Interesting. Very interesting. I kind of like this solution. At first, I was a bit skeptical about how are they going to get rid of this since Roman Empire, 2,000-year-old organizational structure. But I do wonder what that means practically. Wouldn't it just make sense to have this AI model speak to another model that has a different capabilities model, and then the intelligence layer just aggregates what all these models said, and then eventually it's just going to end up with a technology solution for payments run by AI, which is probably going to be used by AI if you've heard of the X402. In practice, this means we normalize down to 3 roles. Individual contributors who build and operate capabilities, the model, the intelligence layer, and the interfaces. They are deep specialists and experts in a specific layer of the system. The world model provides the context that a manager used to provide, so IC can make decisions about their layer without waiting to be told what to do. So are you essentially saying we're getting rid of stand-ups? There's no more daily stand-ups. There's no more meetings where you would meet up with your manager one-to-ones. None of that. As soon as the model senses something, it just pings you on Slack directly, says, hey, go implement this because we need it by noon today or end of day tomorrow or whatever. Or does it just implement it by itself and then come back to you and say, hey, go approve this PR? Do we even need people? What is happening? I'm actually freaking out, honestly. Anyway, second, directly responsible individuals, the DRIs, who own specific cross-cutting problems or opportunities and customer outcomes. A DRI might own the problem of a merchant churn in a specific segment for 90 days, with full authority to pull resources from the world model team, the lending capability team, and the interface team as needed. Are these agent teams, or are they currently still people teams? I would assume this is probably still human teams. DRIs may persist on certain problems or move somewhere else to solve new ones. So this just seems like they're redefining what a product manager or a product owner means in this new intelligence forward way. Lastly, player coaches who combine building with developing people. They replace the traditional manager whose primary job was information routing. A player coach still writes code or builds models or designs interfaces. They also invest in the growth of the people around them. I'm kind of sensing that what they're saying here is instead of you having an actual one-to-one with your direct manager, you have a manager which manages models which manage people. So are we just kind of getting rid of a layer of managers and replacing them with one single person that just duplicates their knowledge across all of these models, which empower the delivery of it? I don't know. Interesting. They don't spend their days in status meetings, alignment sessions, and priority negotiations. The world model handles alignment. The DRI structure handles strategy and priority. The player coach handles craft and people. There's no need for a permanent middle management layer. Everything else the old hierarchy did, the system coordinates, and everyone is empowered with a role that's much closer to the work and the customer. So is this why, I think it was Square, was it Block, that they had these layoffs? They kind of laid off a lot of people, essentially saying, hey, you're not needed anymore. I think they still got decent severance packages, and it was a humane layoff, but how humane of a layoff can it be when, you know, real people are losing their jobs? But this is probably where this comes from, except now it's being explained in a bit more of a clear way. Interesting. So yeah, they claim that they're in the early stages of this transition. It'll be a difficult one, and parts of it will likely break before they work. We're writing about it now because we believe every company will eventually need to confront the same question we did. What does your company understand that is genuinely hard to understand? And is that understanding getting deeper every day? If the answer is nothing, AI is just a cost optimization story. You cut headcount, improve margins for a few quarters, and eventually get absorbed by something smarter. If the answer is deep, AI doesn't augment your company. It reveals what your company actually is. So this is very interesting. We're challenging what companies are. Block's answer is the economic graph, millions of merchants and consumers, both sides of every transaction. So they're essentially just listing what their unique insights are and what their strengths are and what differentiators they have. But it also seems like we can define a company hierarchy using these models in a GitHub template repository. Is this just going to be like you want to start a new company, just clone the repo? If you scaled to 1,000 employees, clone this repo, and then it's just going to like handle your company for you. The only thing you need to do is just kind of find the market differentiators and your unique selling points, and then find your customer and find your niche. But then the actual boring bits of the company are going to run itself. Are we going to have accountants? Is there going to be payroll? Or I don't know. All of these questions are starting to pop up. Companies move fast or slow based on information flow. That was a good rhyming flow. Hierarchy and middle management impede information flow. For 2,000 years, from the Roman contubernium to today's global enterprises, we have had no real alternative. 8 soldiers sharing a tent, needing a fair. The question was whether humans were the only option for what those layers do. They aren't anymore. Interesting. What are your thoughts? This is actually quite interesting. I can see some parallels drawn from AI and how the orchestrator sends work to agents and how those agents come back and then they call tools, which tools could be those function teams that have specific type of data and specific type of capabilities, and they can come back and tell the model, hey, I found this information, here it is, etc. What do you think? Are we going to completely rejiggle of how the companies work? What do you think about this GitHub template repository thing for a company? Are we creating company as a service? Is this going to backfire? Are they going to fire too many people and eventually realize that the reason why these organizational structures existed for 2,000 years is valid, and that's why they survived so long? I don't know. Everything's changing. I'm kind of excited to see what comes next. If you enjoy this type of content, hit the subscribe button. This helps me out a ton. Leave a comment with any type of questions, discussion topics that you have. Let's make this a safe place for any opinions. Let's discuss them. And I can't wait to see what happens with this whole thing. Until next time, see you later.